So I apologize for the whistle.
No, you're good. You're on.
All right. Again, this is the Wake County Libertarian Meetup for January 10th. Thank you all for coming out. A few administrative notes before we get into our presentation for the evening. We do have a few tickets left for a hockey game, 3 tickets left for, we do a group hockey game this Friday, so if you'd like to go to hockey with some other libertarians, please see Patrick Bowersox. Next week, our speaker will be Michael Monaco to talk about the NC Court of Appeals, and he's also running for office. Saturday the 20th is our monthly charity event. This month, that's Interfaith Food Shuttle. So that's a lot of fun. We've done that before. That's 9 or 10 people bagging groceries for, I think, about 90 communities. Is that right, Patrick? 90 families, 90 households. And then the last thing I want to mention before Dr. Stoops gets going is, you know, it's great to have these events where the home team is kind of here on friendly turf talking about a subject that we love. I remind you it's important to sometimes get out and talk to other people. So with that in mind, if you're not familiar with Raleigh CACs, the Midtown CAC will have Christina Kushner from the Wake County School Board. They're on Monday, 22 January, I believe. So if that's of any interest and you want some details, let me know. I enjoy going to those events and kind of seeing how other people view things like educational policy. So with that in mind, I'd like to introduce Dr. Terry Stoops from the John Locke Foundation, and apologize on the wireless mic tonight, but you know, just switch hands as you go. So all yours, sir.
Thank you very much. It's a fantastic location for this event. My New Year's resolution was to drink more beer, so thank you for that. And if you find yourself watching Judge Judy, that's fine. It's good proof that you can resolve disputes between parties without the court system. You just need to go in front of a tough judge like Judge Judy, and she'll take care of the issues for you. So I'm going to talk about school choice a little bit here. Without talking about the concept of school choice. You know, we hear a lot about how school choice is depicted in the media as a marketplace where institutions battle each other for students. And by that battle, they start to become better institutions and provide better opportunities for kids. But let me just argue that there's a better way to think about school choice. And it's this. If you put the child at the center of your concern, at the center of an education system, you have to conclude that providing parents school choice is the absolute best way to provide them educational opportunities. And here's why. As the system is currently structured, we have this paradox. Those who know least about a child have the most control over their education. Now think about that for a second. Those who know least about the child have the most power over their education. You think of the child. Who knows most about an individual child? It's the parents, it's the social networks, it's peers. If you get a little further out, it's the schools, it's the school boards and the various institutions. You get even further out, it's the state government and the federal government. And their knowledge of that child completely disappears. And yet they make critical decisions about the education of a child that they've never met. They have no idea about that child's likes, dislikes, habits, temperament, or any other factor like that. And yet they are in charge of education. The state government allocates around 65% of the funds for our public schools, and around 25% of the funds are from localities. And yet, despite this imbalance, the federal government, the state government has the most power over the public school system. Local school districts have very little say in how they conduct their schools on the local level. It kind of really doesn't make any sense, but that's the way that it's structured because those who control the dollars control the policies. So let's talk about the parents for a minute, because putting the parents in control of a child's education is scary for some people. It's not scary for me. It shouldn't be scary for you, but it's scary for a lot of people out there. No one knows more about the needs, the desires, the temperament of their child than the parents. And when they make a decision about where their child goes to school, they use multiple criteria. We so long hear people say that parents that make the choice of where they send their kid only do so because they want to move their kid to a school that performs better. And that's true. But parents also move their kids for safety reasons. They move their kids to schools for proximity reasons. Think about it. If your kid is bused across a county like Wake County, you want to be close to that child's school. Making a choice to move your child, exercise an educational option so that that child is closer to you is absolutely logical and sensible. And there are some parents that want to take their kids out of the traditional public school system for less testing. These are all legitimate reasons why parents should want to exercise school choice, and yet few, of course, are. There was a study that came out of North Carolina State University that looked at why parents move their children from the public schools to a private school using one of North Carolina's voucher programs. This is the voucher for low-income students, otherwise known as the Opportunity Scholarship. And what they found was a third of the parents cited the academic performance of the school that they were moving their child to, and around 25% said, I want to move my child to a different school for safety reasons. Now, we all saw that heartbreaking video of the child who was being bullied in Kentucky, crying to his mother that the kids were pouring milk on him, that were constantly teasing him. If a parent chooses to move that child to a worse performing school, but a safer one, that is by far a legitimate reason for them to exercise choice. And yet, those who oppose choice don't think so, unfortunately. One of the things to remember about parents when they're making the choice to move their child is that they never make the decision on their own. This is an important fact. So if you're uneasy about parents having the choice to move their child from a public school to a private school or perhaps homeschool, one of the things to remember is that they always use their social networks to find out what kind of information is available on that school, to find out whether that school is appropriate for them. In the NC State study that I mentioned earlier, a majority of the parents talk to friends and family about where to move their child. They are not making a decision based on going online and looking at Facebook and trying to figure out what Facebook says about it. They're asking people who go to that school, they're asking families who go to that school, they're asking friends whether a school would be appropriate. Now, whenever I start talking about parents making decisions, I have to read a quote that from an email that was sent to me after I appeared at an education policy class at UNC Chapel Hill. Any fans of UNC Chapel Hill? The teaching assistant that had me come and talk about educational options was clearly disturbed by what I had to say about putting these parents in charge. And here's what she wrote to me. She wrote, personally, I want choice of where I send my kids, but I'm also educated and informed. What can we do for disadvantaged populations? How can we create mechanisms wherein they benefit from school choice as much as advantaged populations? Think about the kind of attitude that's being expressed here. She's basically saying that disadvantaged populations are stupid and don't have the ability to choose a school on their own. But what we do know is they don't choose a school on their own. They use their social networks. And the assumption that these parents are dumb and not therefore able to choose the school is really insulting. But this is the belief from those who oppose choice. The parents are just too dumb to be able to choose an education that best meets the needs of their child. Think about that, how strange that is. The person who knows the child the best is, according to opponents of school choice, the very person that is unequipped for providing a choice for their child. Now, parents make mistakes, and sometimes they choose to send their child to a school that just doesn't fit. And I want you to think of two scenarios. Scenario number one is a parent that chose a school for their child where it doesn't work out. That parent is able to then, the next year, choose a different school. Parents will make mistakes, they'll misjudge. It's a one-year problem, but it's easily resolved by going to a different school. If you are in a school district, how do you move to a different school? Well, it's very easy. You just sell your house and you move somewhere else in the district, which is, as everyone knows, a very easy process. Just sell your house to pick up and move to a different area in the school district, because that is the way the school districts determine where you go to school, your address. So, there's another way that you can go about doing it. You can lie about your address, which there have been parents that lie about their address to allow their kids to go to a better school. Those parents get arrested. That's what happens to those parents who lie about their address just to provide better educational opportunities for their children. Now I'm going to transition a bit into what school choice looks like in North Carolina. And I can tell you that school choice is on the rise here in North Carolina. North Carolina's school districts have a population of about 1.4 million students. Here's the interesting thing about that. It's not changing. The population of our district school systems has been generally the same for the last 10 years. It's not something you won't hear much on the media, but around 1.4 million students have been attending district schools for the last 10 years. And we have some spikes and dips, but choice is increasing significantly. Our charter schools, which enroll over 100,000 students as of this year, have tripled in the last 10 years. Charter schools, as you may know, are public schools that have some regulatory flexibility. They can do things that district schools don't have, but they do receive funds from the taxpayers. And just as a moment that I can sort of tout something that I'm doing, my wife and I founded a charter school in southern Wake County called Carolina Charter Academy, and it'll be opening this year. And you may think, how'd they come up with something so creative, Carolina Charter Academy? No one else thought to name their charter school that. I thought it was hilarious that we were able to do it. So we see ourselves as the de facto representatives of charter schooling in North Carolina. Homeschooling has increased significantly as well. As of last year, around 127,000 kids are in homeschools. And the homeschool population has increased by 79% over the last 10 years. And when people think of homeschooling, they're thinking, well, you know, these are conservative Christians, this is a certain type of homeschooling. But this ain't your mama's homeschooling anymore. Homeschooling is branched out to very different types of people. You have on one hand evangelicals that believe that the values that are being taught in a district are not appropriate for their children. And then you have liberals that are just so disenchanted with the education their children are getting in a public school that they move their child into a homeschool. Lots of diversity in the homeschool movement. And then finally, we have private schooling. And we're not seeing much growth from private schools. And there's a reason why. The Great Recession really took a bite out of the private schools. They found that they couldn't operate as well. They couldn't get the enrollment they needed to stay afloat during the Great Recession. And so we're not seeing much growth in private schooling. But because of North Carolina's 2 voucher programs, we're starting to see a rebound in charter school enrollment. Now, North Carolina has 2 private school voucher programs. The first is the Opportunity Scholarship Program. It's a $4,200 voucher for children that are at or below the federal poverty level. It currently has around 6,700 kids receiving vouchers for around 450 schools. We've had a Opportunity Scholarship in North Carolina for about 5 years, and it continues to grow year after year because the North Carolina General Assembly has mandated that each year the amount of money available for opportunity scholarships increases by $10 million. North Carolina also has a disability grant program that is much smaller, that provides grants of $8,000 per child, that allows around 1,000 kids to take advantage of this program, where if they have a documented disability, they can take the voucher and move it to a private school. North Carolina's newest school choice program, which will come online later this year, is our ESA, our Education Savings Account program, which will give $9,000 accounts to parents to use for educational services. Now, the way that this works is very interesting, because ESAs aren't something that's very typical. We're one of a handful of states in the nation that have education savings accounts. And basically what this does is, it gives parents a set amount of money to use for educational services that might include tutoring, educational therapies, private school tuition, virtual schooling, and any number of expenses according to what that parent believes that child needs. Now, the current ESA program in North Carolina is only open to special needs kids, but I think eventually we're going to see an expansion of this, because it provides maximum flexibility to parents. And that's really what we should be thinking about, as I mentioned earlier, giving parents maximum flexibility, because after all, they know what's best for their child. Now, there have been some concerns about abuse of the ESA system. In Arizona, one of the early adopters of ESAs, they found that parents were using, they gave parents a debit card, and they found that parents were using the debit card on all manner of expenses. They shut that down pretty quickly. And they found ways to root out some of those problems. North Carolina is probably going to adopt a model, which is really smart, is providing an online marketplace for parents to be able to purchase goods and services, so that they can provide some sort of oversight as to what they spend. Now, every expenditure that they have is subject to oversight by a government body. That part is clear by an ESA. But most expenditures are pretty tame, some expenditures not so much. And as we saw in Arizona, lesson learned, right? A lot of the principles, ironically enough, for rooting out fraud in an ESA program were found by those who were rooting out fraud in food stamps, EBT cards. They found how to root out fraud that way, and then they applied it to the Education Savings Account program. That's an overview of school choice in North Carolina. It's very clear that school choice is on the move, that school choice is a significant part of our educational landscape. Right now, 17% of our children have exercised some sort of school choice. And that number is only going to increase as the public school population flatlines and the choices continue to grow. This is mainly due to policies that were passed by the Republican General Assembly over the last 5 years. It lifted the cap on charter schools, the voucher programs. They made homeschooling a little more user-friendly. So as long as those policies stay in place, I think we're going to continue to see school choice be a significant part of North Carolina's education system. Now, you may ask, how does this compare with other states? We're ahead of the curve in the Southeast. There are some states that have more robust school choice programs, particularly Florida, in the Southwest, Arizona, in the Midwest, Indiana have extremely broad school choice programs. But here in North Carolina, we're making our move, and we can legitimately be called a school choice state. So I want to keep my comments fairly brief so that I can open it up for questions, because I find, as the education guy, there's usually plenty of questions out there. You know, I realize that I really haven't introduced myself or my background, so I'll do that at the end here real quick. I'm originally from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and we got anyone else from Western Pennsylvania? Oh, fantastic. Go Steelers. And I'm a first-generation college student, and I wound up getting a PhD, which is really strange. And even stranger was my brother was also a first-generation college student, essentially, and he ended up getting his PhD from Harvard. Unfortunately, he became this crappy lefty who lives in Boston and thinks he's better than everyone. And I like to feel like I'm the virtuous one in the family. I went to the University of Virginia. I got a PhD in the history of education. So I've been at the John Locke Foundation for 12 years. And I do want to thank you very much for the invitation to come here and open it up for questions. Oh, way in the back. Really? Yeah. Okay. Speak up. The question was about the innovative school district. And the innovative school district is a model that's been tried in various places, including Memphis, Tennessee. And the idea is that you have a low-performing school, a chronically low-performing school. And you take that school and put it under different management and give it some time to try to improve the student performance. In North Carolina, the one school that was subject to our new innovative school district is a school in Robeson County. And it's an elementary school, Ashpole, I can't remember the name of it actually, Southside Ashpole. The school right now has accepted the invitation to become part of the innovative school district and be subject to an operator that will be selected by the State Board of Education in a couple weeks. In a lot of other states and cities, the innovative school district has not necessarily been all that successful because what they've done is they've tried to take entire districts or entire groups of schools and to put them under this model. What North Carolina has changed up a little bit is they're only selecting a handful of schools, in this case, one school per year, to go under a charter authorized or a charter school operator, charter school entity of some type, and manage the school. I have a very pragmatic view of this model is we need to try it. I mean, it's worth a try. The schools that are being considered under this model are chronically low performing. Some of them have been low performing schools for decades. So it's worth a try, but we need to ensure that not only the selection of the charter school operator is sound, but that they're instituting sound practices in these school districts and they have buy-in from all the stakeholders that are in the district. So it's worth watching, it's worth trying, but it's not a panacea. Yes, sir. Yeah, here. I agree. I mean, I think giving the parents. Oh, yes. Thank you. The question is one of the many contradictions you'll hear probably this evening from me. Is that how does that fare with the idea of giving parents the option, the educational opportunity to move their child to a different school? The problem with Robeson County is that there aren't options. Is that we need more options in counties like that and low-performing counties. Right now, there's really nowhere for the kids to go, except for Robeson County schools. There aren't a whole lot of charter schools in the Sandhills. So this becomes a supply and demand problem, is there's plenty of demand for choices. There just isn't a whole lot of supply. So I agree, give them choices, but when choices aren't available, this might be the other option. Now, they don't become part of this charter operator permanently. The charter operator has 5 years in order to prove themselves to be, to have some kind of sound plan to turn the school around. The other part of this is that the children in that district get flexibility to be able to do different things. So, you know, maybe it's a desperation move, and I'll be completely honest about it. It might be a desperation move. But in lieu of the options that don't exist, it's worth a try. Yes, sir.
You mentioned that often criticism is that of school choice, that the parents are maybe not educated enough or not capable of actually making that choice.
Yeah.
Are these the same parents that were probably educated in public schools?
Yeah, so we have public school parents trying to make a decision about what best meets the needs of their child. Yeah, they probably were educated in public schools. But they have an unprecedented number of resources available to them. Remember, I said that the parents aren't making the decision on their own, number one. They're making a decision in consultation with the social networks that exist, neighborhoods, family, friends. Second of all, it's easy for a parent to go online to a resource like greatschools.com. It provides all the information that they would need for what that school looks like. Now, here's the interesting thing is the research says that a parent will make an informed decision about the education, about moving their child to a private school if they're provided a bare minimum education, bare minimum amount of information about that school. In other words, it doesn't take a whole lot of information for the parents to make a sound decision moving their child from a traditional public school to a private school. There are those who think that in order for parents to make an informed decision, they have to have all the diagnostic information. They have to know what the curriculum model is, and that actually can be pretty helpful. But a minimal amount of information is required for the parents to make that decision, and they never make it alone. And if they make the wrong decision, those who were educated in public schools, then they can easily make that change into an education, into a school, or an education environment that better meets the needs of their kids. In other words, if they do make a mistake, it's easy to fix. Yes, sir.
I wonder if you had any thoughts about the Hades Academy that have been cropping up. I know this one at APAC is very similar with, I'm not sure how many there are, but I wonder if you had any thoughts about that.
Yeah, the question is about Thales Academies. And I've been friends with Bob Luddy, who founded Thales Academies for about 12 years now. And basically what this is a chain of low-cost private schools, high-quality and low-cost private schools that solve one of the problems of supply that we see in places like Robeson County. In other words, if there was a Thales Academy down where this failing school is, then there would be no contest. Forget about going to the innovative school district. I would tell all those kids to go to a Thales Academy or give them a voucher to go to a Thales Academy. The problem is bringing Thales to scale. So it's a fantastic model, low-cost private schools, high quality. There are some limitations. You can't do as much with special needs children as you can in some of the other schools. But regardless of that we need more of that because we need to increase the supply of high-quality private schools available to kids. I know that Mr. Luddy is continuing to look at opportunities for expanding Thales Academies beyond what he is doing here in Wake County, and I hope he's able to do that because there's a pressing need for those sorts of institutions that aren't available right now to too many kids. Yes, sir.
Could you go over the process of which students are selected to go to those charter schools? I know there's always a waiting list. We've gone through this process. It seems like there's a lottery.
Yeah.
And maybe you can go over the process of which students are selected and which ones aren't.
Sure. The question was about charter school process. How do they decide who gets into these schools? For most charter schools, they will accept all applications that come. And the number of applications, if they exceed the number of seats available, will conduct a lottery. There are a handful of schools in North Carolina that have a weighted lottery in order to try to ensure that a certain percentage of low-income and minority students are elected to go to the school. So if a school is conducting a lottery, obviously they're not able to skim the cream of the crop. Charter schools aren't able to just choose the kids that enter. They have to conduct a lottery, a fair lottery that gives everyone the same chance to enter that school. Now, if there aren't more applications than the number of seats available, then there is no lottery, and everyone who applied gets to come in. But I can tell you, and don't tell anyone, but I was told that the next charter school report that comes out will reveal that there are 55,000 kids on charter school wait lists statewide. Think about that. 55,000. Now, it's an unduplicated count. You have parents that apply to 5 or 6 charter schools, so we'll have to take that with a grain of salt. But think about the need for additional charter schools with the demand that exists right now. So you will invariably have a lottery because 55,000 kids want to get into charter schools. Now, charter schools right now only enroll over about 100,000 students. So we can conceivably see a huge increase, a huge uptick in the number of students attending charter schools if we just had the schools to be able to accommodate those students. Let me tell you, from personal experience, having a charter school approved by the state is a very difficult process. They look at everything. They look at every part of your charter school application, every part of your plan to ensure that your plan is a sound one, because you're using taxpayer money, after all, to operate this school. But the demand exists. Charter schools are not able to skim the cream of the crop. They have to use a lottery, and many do. What you find in charter schools, like the one that's operated by Bob Luddy, he started in charter schools and then went to private schools. If you look at Franklin Academy, which is Mr. Luddy's charter school up there in Wake Forest, he'll have 2 or 3 seats open per year. That's what kind of demand, and then 1,000 people applying for 2 or 3 seats. So it's obvious there's a tremendous demand for charter school seats that is not being met, and perhaps we'll start catching up. And let me just say real quick, the reason why we haven't met it is because for the first 15 years of charter schools' existence, they were capped at 100 schools. So because of that limitation, there was a huge pent-up demand that even increasing the number of schools hasn't caught up to yet. Yes, sir. You didn't have your hand up? Anyone? All right. Yes, sir. Yeah. Right. The question was about charter management organizations. And unfortunately, I think I know the school you're talking about. Isn't that horrible? Yes, his question was about charter management organizations. And let me explain what they are first. A charter management organization is a company that runs the day-to-day operations of a school, puts up the initial capital for that school, and usually has a presence on the charter school's board of directors. Now, charter schools have to be run by a nonprofit board, but they can contract with a charter management company like Charter Schools USA or Heritage Academies that give a certain amount of control to the charter management organization. Now, it's a real double-edged sword. As someone who's opening the charter school and who's relatively poor, I don't have the kind of capital that a charter management organization has to be able to build a building or to go through the process that's necessary to actually open a school. On the other hand, there are instances where the charter management company can do things that really undermine the education that's provided at that school. Now, not all charter school management companies are the same. The organization that my wife and I have signed on to is actually a nonprofit called Team CFA, and they're not a corporation, they're a nonprofit that provides assistance to the school at no cost to us. Not as much assistance as Charter Schools USA, or heritage academies or some of these other for-profit entities, but still assistance nonetheless. So it's the difficulty of opening a charter school and not having access to the type of capital that a traditional public school system has access to, thanks to your tax dollars. Not all charter schools have a charter management organization behind it. To be completely honest, the margins for a charter management organization are pretty thin, so they're not making tons of money off of kids. But nevertheless, sometimes they do more harm than good, and the school you're talking about, they definitely did. And I'm sorry about that. But it's not my fault.
What's that? School or the charter? He was talking about a Charter Schools USA school.
I won't reveal which one.
Okay.
Well, go ahead. If you want to ask your question now, it's a good transition into what his question was.
Dynamics in the charter school for autism kids on the spectrum, that the parents came together to develop. It felt like the school systems were basically institutionalizing their autistic kids within the school, because they were segregated classrooms, they were kept away from the other students, wicked things were supposedly happening, mostly allegations like locking children in closets until they relieved themselves on themselves, and children had already previously been trained, all kinds of horrible things. The parents came together and created dynamic charter schools. And I was associated with the lady that was doing it. She was a Democrat, a liberal Democrat, that was trying to do this school. And it totally blindsided her when the public school inspectors lied about the facility, lied about what was going on inside of the school in order to have their charter revoked. They had raised enough money. They were in the red for a short period of time, but raised enough money to be in the black. But they used that against them as well. And I tried to explain to her she was up against the double whammy because the private for-profit charter schools, especially since they had a seat on the board that decided these things, the for-profit ones like the tutoring, after-school tutoring companies had a representative, the virtual school charter school person had a representative, and it's more or less the board is deciding to if you can be included or not. Now, my question is there any way to get around this kind of double whammy situation where public schools and the private sector charter schools team up to squash a charter school that's a threat to public?
Okay, the question was about Dynamics Charter School, which was a charter school here in Wake County that for autistic children. And the charter school was eventually shut down by the State Board of Education. And I remember actually reading the appeals from parents to not shut the charter school down that were absolutely heartbreaking. Absolutely heartbreaking. There were a combination of factors that undid Dynamics Charter School. The financial pressures were one, but charter schools, because they're independent entities, aren't really equipped to deal with the backlash from those who oppose them. There really is no, in North Carolina, organization that represents charter schools, so that when they are attacked, they can push back politically. They can have representation that will appeal to the members of the State Board of Education on their behalf. To just give you a sense, charter schools are an $800 million industry in North Carolina, and there really isn't a group representing charter schools. So when you have a charter school that's trying to do great things, that's blindsided by any number of factors, there's really no help for that charter school. And that's what happened with Dynamics, in my opinion, is that they were sort of left out to dry because they were receiving no help from anyone else, and they were victim of some of the political forces that were in play both in Wake County and at the State Board of Education. And it's the State Board of Education that decides who gets a charter and who gets the charter revoked and who is under probation or double secret probation or whatever they have. And in this case, they chose, unfortunately, to shut the school down. I think we could probably use 20 schools that cater just to autistic children like Dynamics, but it's not going to happen because people fear that the same thing that happened to that school would happen to their school. So we see actually a movement away from schools that cater to special needs kids, which is absolutely unfortunate, but true. Unless you're really rich, or you're one of the fortunate ones who gets a disability grant that could send them to a private school.
The civic costs and polling shows school choice polls very well. School choice has been broadening, expanding in the General Assembly. What do you see as next, or what would you like or see next? What's achievable? You know, and what kind of messaging goes around that? Your opinion, your experience.
The question is about the popularity of school choice. What's next? What kind of messages should we be sending to parents about school choice? Really, what's next is the education savings account. We're going to have the education savings account coming online this year, and I think eventually what's going to happen is a decision to take our existing voucher programs and to turn them into education savings accounts. One reason why all of you should be optimistic is that choice is winning in Wake County. You have a school district that has 160,000 kids that's extremely and increasingly unpopular with parents because their kids are constantly being moved around, redistricted, rezoned. The number of homeschools in Wake County is the largest in North Carolina. There's plenty of private school options, and increasingly there are plenty of charter school options. Parents are hungry for choice, and they want to hear that there are options available. What's tricky about the messaging is that while parents want choice, they don't want anything bad to happen to the district schools. So one message to stay away from, if you're asking my opinion, is not to say we will obliterate the district schools and Wake County will be at our feet weeping and bleeding and gnashing teeth. Now you can say it privately and you all can have a chuckle about it behind the scenes. But the reality is that parents don't want anything bad to happen to the Wake County schools, but they are dying for the options. And so to let them know that you are for the options and that you trust them to make that decision is absolutely essential. And I think that the Civitas polling really plays that out. That while people are really receptive to choice, actually not just Civitas polling, but polling in general, plays out the fact that they really like choice, but they don't want anything bad to happen. That's why those who oppose choice are constantly saying that choice is defunding the traditional public school system, because that tugs on the heartstrings of parents who don't want anything bad to happen for the public schools. And they really don't. But they know, the other side knows that that's an effective message, and they will continue to say it, even though it is not true. The traditional public system, I did a calculation a few months ago. If you took everyone that's in a home, charter, or private school and put them back into the traditional system, it would cost the state over $1 billion to accommodate that population of students that right now are exercising school choice. $1 billion. It is a lie, because they're taking kids away. And not only that, they're taking kids away that are expensive to educate. The special needs voucher, the voucher for low-income kids, these are children that require additional expense to educate. And we're taking them out of the system and spending less on a voucher for those kids than we would spend in the traditional system, even factoring in all the fixed costs that a traditional system would incur.
What about the criticism that just charter schools that are cited in money? I see your point that you said if it's a private school, obviously the tax dollars are going to the parents make permission, so yes, instead of homeschooling. But the charter school will get that money that actually follows the kids, the charter school. How do we respond to that?
The dirty secret is that school districts, especially Wake County, don't want all those charter school kids to come back. It would devastate them financially because they don't have the facilities to be able to accommodate it. Now, that's not so much an issue in some of the other school districts, but the amount that charters spend is less than we're spending in a district school because charter schools don't receive money for capital expenses. They don't receive lottery money, whereas school districts do to be able to build school buildings. So it actually is a relief for counties like Wake to have kids in charter schools because they don't have the money to build buildings for them. It's kind of a different scenario in some of the other districts. But for every kid that we move from a district school to a charter school, that is a seat that is not, that the district does not need to accommodate by building a school or hiring a teacher. And so that's where some of the savings is realized, is the fact that charter schools don't receive funding for their capital expenses.
How do they pay for it?
What's that?
How do they pay for their capital expenses?
Last question. This is a great question. How do charter schools pay for their capital expenses? They do something very simple. They use their operating money. Up to 20% of the operating funds that a charter school has will be used to pay for either leasing a facility or, like we're doing, hiring a development company to build a school and then essentially paying them back on an installment purchase contract. So they use a portion of their operating fund. Think about this for a minute. So charter schools have to take a portion of their operating money to pay for the facility, which leaves them around 80 cents on the dollar to take care of the instructional needs of their children. Those are worries that the district system that really doesn't exist. Now, charter schools find different ways of accommodating facilities. Some will rent old school buildings. If you're in a county that's losing population, some will build new. But that is how charter schools pay for their facilities. And you know what? They build great facilities at a fraction of the cost that a district would. I'll give you an example. The same school that a charter school will build an elementary school for 500 kids. They'll spend around $9 or $10 million for that school. A district will spend around $26 million for an elementary school, around $50 million for a middle school, and the high schools are getting close to $100 million because they have to buy up 60 or 70 acres and accommodate 2,500 to 3,000 students. Frankly, I really don't want my kid in a high school with 2,500 to 3,000 students, and that's where charter schools could really save the day. So that's a fantastic question. These are all fantastic questions. I'd be happy to stick around if you have any other questions and chat with you about it. Thank you very much.
That's not really a state animal, but if you were going to put a logo on Carolina Charter Academy, you could always consider a porcupine. Just a thought. You do what you got to do. Cardinals are nice, I guess.
The cardinal is the state bird of North Carolina. I wanted to go with the state, essentially okay, so I would have loved to make the porcupine the state, Carolina Charter Academy mascot. We chose the state bird, which is the cardinal, but I wanted to choose basically the state rodent or the state spider. And the squirrel, I thought the squirrel would be a great mascot for an elementary school. but the state spider is completely terrifying. And I thought, for elementary school kids, that is fantastic. But my wife, who's going to end up running the school, didn't see it the same way. So anyway, thank you very much for the mug.
Thank you for coming. We enjoyed it. I'll just close. For those who aren't tracking the WakeLP as closely, we currently have about 10 people lined up to run for General Assembly in 2018. That's already much better in 2016. We're going to, it's 11 House seats, 5 Senate seats. They keep moving lines around, but we think we're getting close, and hopefully the courts will soon with final maps. But education is going to be something that, the Wake County Libertarian Party and its candidates will talk about in 2018. So if you want to see this again, Brad has a link to it on YouTube because it was recorded. So you can always watch parts of it again to get all those facts and figures written down. And
send it to your friends.
There you go, and send it to your friends. Thank you all for coming. I appreciate it.